Thanks for joining us today for Jennifer Schaus and Associates and our Webinar Wednesday program coming to you live from Washington, D.C. We're uncovering each part of the DFARS, our Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement, every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern. As you know, the DFARS are the rulebooks for contracting with the Defense Department, and we've been moving sequentially, so we started with DFARS Part 201 in January, and we will be finishing with Part 253 in December. Our webinars are every Wednesday and are provided complimentary. They are recorded and can be downloaded from our website and YouTube channel, which now holds over 450 of our government contracting webinars. In the interest of time, we do not take questions, so if you do have questions for our speaker, we will have this information on 2 of the slides in the presentation today. Virginia PTAC at GMU offers free one-on-one counseling to firms in Virginia on federal, state, and local procurement topics. Online resources and group trainings are free with no restriction on business location. If you're interested in learning more, please use the link provided to explore what PTAC can offer. Set-aside alert provides up-to-date news, information, and opportunities for small business federal contractors. Their daily opportunities alerts assure you won't miss important sources sought and solicitation announcements, providing details so you can jump on the hot ones. Every 2 weeks, they deliver concise breaking news, events, regulations, and teaming opportunities. And please join the Reston Chamber of Commerce Government Contractors Council for regular meetings. You can contact Alicia Field with the email shown on your screen if you have any questions. Okay, and now a little bit about us. We work with U.S. federal government contractors, including product, service, and software firms. Our services range from market analysis reports to contract vehicles and compliance, and more information can be found on our website. I also wanted to inform you of a new series that we're holding this year. We have launched a monthly series called the GovCon Live Q&A Cafe, and this is a live webinar series held each month that will take place on the second Friday of each month in 2021 at 12 p.m. Eastern. We have assembled a group of 4 panelists who are subject matter experts on a specific federal contracting topic. The panelists will make a short presentation about the topics listed here on your screen and then take your live questions about that topic. Our panelists include attorneys, consultants, and other industry professionals, and you can sign up on our website under the Q&A Cafe tab. Sponsorships are available. Please email hello@jenniferschaus.com for a media kit with pricing details. Also, please note that you can use code DFARS for a $15 discount on each of these webinars. So on your screen right now are the remainder of the webinars for this year. And specifically, this Friday on September 10th, our speakers, Rena, Troy, Andres, and Deborah will be covering oral presentations. Next month in October, we are covering set-asides with Anna, Eric, Sai, and Tim. In November, we get into pricing with Michael, Marsha, Tracy, and Jeff. And then lastly, on December 10th, our speakers, Kate, Brad, and Shirley and Joshua will be presenting on M&A. And again, the discount code is DFARS to save $15, bringing your cost to $20 per webinar. I also wanted to highlight an additional webinar we're holding this year. The title of the webinar is Fiscal New Year Kickoff Best Practices, and that will be on October 1st at 12 p.m. And both the sponsor link and registration link can be found on your screen and on our website. Our speakers will be covering market research, marketing, sales and capture, proposal writing, and compliance. Sponsorships are available for this webinar as well. please email hello@jenniferschauf.com for pricing details. Okay, and now to introduce our speaker, Lucas Hanbach. Welcome, Lucas. We are glad to have you here with us today, and I now turn the floor over to you.
Okay, thank you, Hunter. As Hunter mentioned, I'm Lucas Hanbach. I'm a shareholder with Rogers Joseph O'Donnell PC. RJO is a firm that specializes in government contracting. We're one of the top ranked firms. We have offices in DC and San Francisco. I am primarily a government contracts practitioner, and I'm excited to talk to everyone today about DFAR Part 239. If you could advance the slide, please. So as mentioned, today we're going to be talking about DFAR Part 239, which is Acquisition of Information Technology. Next slide. And as we talk about this, the first thing I wanted to do is just give a little bit of an overview, because I'm not, I don't know if everyone who's joining or who will watch the recorded version later will have gone through all of the prior installations and understand the full layout of the land here. So just to make sure, in case you're jumping into this midstream, that you understand how all of this fits together. The DFAR is the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement. It supplements FAR Part 39, which is the Federal Acquisition Regulation. Those regulations are found in Title 48 of the Code of Federal Regulations. And the Part 239 that we're going to be talking about today for the DFAR is supposed to be read in harmony with FAR Part 39. So if you haven't looked at the prior webinar that was given on FAR Part 39, you might also want to go review that. And I'll give you a quick overview of some of the key points from FAR Part 39 that you have to keep in mind as you think through the DFAR stuff that we're going to talk about today. So the concepts that FAR Part 39 covers generally apply, and some of the important ones that you will see in there if you go and look at the regs, or you look at one of the prior webinars, there are prohibitions on contracting with Kaspersky Labs, and the Section 889 prohibitions against contracting with certain Chinese affiliated entities like Huawei and ZTE and others. There are also preferences for modular contracting. So what you were supposed to do under FAR Part 39 is try to break procurements of information technology into smaller parts, if you can, as a way to encourage competition. There are privacy requirements that apply under FAR Part 39 because information technology and systems often capture personal information, PII, that needs to be protected under federal privacy laws like the Privacy Act. And then there are also Rehabilitation Act requirements that generally apply to these procurements. You want to make sure that folks who have disabilities can access and use the systems. So those pieces of FAR Part 39 generally also apply to any procurement that's conducted under DFAR Part 239. But it's important to understand that FAR Part 39 does not, by its facial terms, apply to procurements of national security systems. And we're going to talk about that on the next slide, if we can advance. And that's really where the DFAR starts to step in and give us some new information about what we need to do. The DFAR expressly covers national security systems. And what's interesting is national security systems, although the DFAR covers them, they're actually defined in FAR Part 39. So you see I've got a reference to the FAR 39.002 definition there. And I won't go through all of the bullets and read them, but generally what a national security system is it's an information system or a telecommunication system that involves either intelligence or military activities. And these could be things like cryptologic activities, they could be command and control of military forces, collection and dissemination of intelligence. There are weapon systems, you know, when you get into some of the advanced hardware that the military owns, for example, on fighter aircraft, for example, or some of the ships, you have information technology systems that are used there. And basically it's any kind of a system that is critical to the direct fulfillment of military or intelligence missions. But there is an important carve out, which you see in bullet 5 on this slide. And these systems do not include routine administrative and business applications. So things like your HR systems for payroll, finance, logistics, personnel management, those are carved out from national security systems, but national security systems generally can encompass a broad range of other types of systems to which these DFAR requirements apply. And then as you go through DFAR Part 239, you'll see that there are also some other specific DoD regulations that get incorporated at various points. If we can go to the next slide, I'll address those as they come up. So the first thing to understand about DFAR Part 239 is that there's a preference for commercial items. And even though we're procuring national security systems under DFAR Part 239, you are still, under the DoD regulations, supposed to try to procure your needs through commercial items procurements wherever your procurement exceeds the simplified acquisition threshold. Now, as always, the head of a contracting activity can always make a determination to not go with commercial items if after market research they determine that no commercial item could meet the needs. And one other thing that you have to keep in mind here, and it's particularly relevant under the DFAR, is that the simplified acquisition threshold actually has different thresholds that can apply under different circumstances. The simplified acquisition threshold is set in FAR 2.101. There's a definition of it, and if you look, it tells you the amount. The current general amount is $250,000, but as I said, there are some exceptions which are particularly relevant to DoD, because if you're dealing with a contingency operation, or if you're defending from certain types of attacks on the United States, nuclear, biological, chemical, or in particular here under IT systems, cyber attacks, if you're contracting inside the US, the simplified acquisition threshold is actually $800,000. And outside the US, it's actually up to $1.5 million. And then there's also a different threshold for services when you're conducting humanitarian or peacekeeping operations. And that threshold is $500,000 if you're conducting operations outside the US. So it's just important to understand that what they should be doing is whenever they are exceeding those thresholds, DoD should be trying to procure commercial items wherever it can, unless they've made a determination in writing that there are no commercial items which will meet their needs. Next slide. So because they are trying to procure commercial items, DFAR Part 239 also requires generally that they contract under standard commercial licenses. And these are the licenses that are customarily provided to the public, except where they are inconsistent with federal procurement law. And to understand where that might happen, think of a contract that so the government has to budget every year. They have a budget process that they go through. They have to comply with federal statutes like the Anti-Deficiency Act, which prevent them from making obligations in excess of funds that Congress has appropriated. And they may, as a result, have contracts where they need the period of the contract to extend beyond a point at which they have obligated funds. And so they might they might need to incorporate clauses like a limitation of funds or a limitation of cost clause. And those types of clauses, which are driven by legal requirements that the government has to follow, might be inconsistent with payment terms in your license agreement, for example. But generally, what they're supposed to be doing is sticking to your customary license terms that are offered to commercial clients, except where it's inconsistent with federal procurement law. So just keep in mind that although you generally will be under your standard commercial license, they may want to negotiate specific items to the extent that it's inconsistent with federal procurement law. And if they're asking you to agree to inconsistent terms, you should be checking to make sure that what they're requesting is driven by some kind of a federal procurement law requirement. The government also cannot require a contractor to furnish technical information that you don't customarily provide to the public, unless that information is related to modifications to the software or the system that has been made at the government's expense and to meet the government's requirements and needs. And they also can't require contractors to relinquish their rights to use, modify, release, et cetera, their software and their systems unless they do so by mutual agreement. So you can negotiate those types of rights. You don't have to give them right out of the box. And generally, the government gets only the rights that it would get under the commercial license unless it negotiates acceptable terms. One other important thing to understand here, and this ties back to something we discussed on the first slide, acquisitions of software maintenance also have to follow DFAR subpart 208.74. And when you go to that regulation, and you could go and look at the prior webinars on DFAR part 208, but when you go to subpart 74, you'll see that it requires the use of enterprise software agreements because they want to try to get DoD favorable terms and pricing. And so although FAR Part 39 generally expresses a preference for modular contracting, you're supposed to try to procure the systems in smaller increments. When you're talking about software and maintenance, you're supposed to try to do that on an enterprise basis so that DoD can get favorable terms and pricing. And so things like help desk support, those kinds of things, generally those can be bigger, and what they're supposed to do is try to procure those on an enterprise-wide basis. Next slide, please. So moving on from the commercial nature of procurements, the other big thing that applies here, and which should not be a surprise since what we're talking about primarily under DoD procurements are national security systems, are information assurance requirements. So information assurance is generally about protecting and defending the information and the systems in order to ensure that the information and systems are available, that the integrity of the system is maintained, the information within them is authentic, and that its confidentiality is maintained, those kinds of things. Those requirements are driven by a number of federal statutes, different regulations and policies, which are cited in the first sub-bullet on this page. And we won't get into the details of all of them, but those information assurance requirements will flow down into contracts that are issued under DFAR Part 239, and they should be included. Where you'll see them is in your statement of work, in the specifications or the statement of objectives that's attached to the contract. One other thing that you will see in certain procurements are tempest requirements, and this is the last bullet on this page. The agency may make a determination that tempest requirements for compromising emanations apply. If we could go to the next slide, we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail, what tempest is. So tempest is a national security agency program. Tempest is the code name for the program. It's actually a classified program, so a lot of the details of it are not widely available, and that is to protect the program from our adversaries so that people don't know how to defeat the protections. But it generally deals with compromising emanations, and those, you can see the definition of what a compromising emanation is under the program there. But basically what it is it's a signal that your IT system might send out. Typically it's some kind of an electromagnetic or electronic signal, but it can also be sounds, mechanical vibrations. It can be, any kind of an emanation from the system that an adversary could intercept and either, disrupt or use to interpret the information that's being exchanged and spy on the system. And if you end up in a procurement where a determination has been made that tempest standards will apply, you will have to include the protections that go along with the program, and those include things like special markings, acceptance requirements, accreditation. There are also some basic protections called red-black protections, which are separation, either some kind of a physical distance separation or a shielding that prohibits the emanation from being picked up. And if you have these requirements in your contract, it is very important that you comply with them, because remember that you're dealing with a national security system, and you need to protect the information that's in that system. So you'll have to do things like put these protections in place, make sure that you have special supervision and control over the quality and manufacture of any items that you're producing, etc. If we can go to the next slide, please. On that last point, that leads into another big thing that's required under the DFAR, which is measures taken to assess supply chain risk. So supply chain risk it really gets to the risk that an adversary could somehow sabotage or otherwise introduce things like spyware or flaws into the design of items that are produced that would disrupt or degrade the systems and the operation of the systems. And it applies to covered systems, and more specifically, covered items of supply. So covered items of supply are any things that go into the covered system. And covered system, it's important to understand, is the same as a national security system, but it's actually a little bit broader. And it can include systems that also house and store classified information. So if you go back to the slide from a few minutes ago, and you think about the definition of a national security system, and there's a carve out for things like human resources systems, logistics, payment systems, those kinds of things. To the extent that those systems will contain classified information, they're subject to the supply chain risk requirements, even though they're not subject to other requirements that would apply to national security systems. And if we can go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about what the supply chain risk procedures are. But basically what these things require is that, and if we can go to the next slide, please, what the supply chain risk requirements are is that you have a handle on your supply chain, you know, who's manufacturing it, you know, where the source of your products is coming from. You take measures to prevent things like counterfeit parts, that kind of stuff. But there are some teeth in the DFAR that allow the Department of Defense to take action if it thinks that you are not on top of the supply chain risk provisions that might be in your contract. And so where you have a performance specification or an evaluation factor for supply chain risk, the DoD can establish standards that you have to meet for that supply chain risk. And then within the DoD, people like the Secretary of Defense or the branch secretaries are empowered to make findings in accordance with DFAR 239.7304 to determine whether you are in compliance with the standards that have been set. And if you're not, they can do a few things. They can exclude you from the competition. They can withhold consent to subcontract to you. They can limit disclosure of information related to the exclusion. And it's important that you understand that those kinds of actions are expressly not reviewable in a bid protest under the DFAR. So normally, if you are excluded for some reason under a FAR or DFAR procurement, those kinds of things can be adjudicated in a forum like GAO or the Court of Federal Claims, or in some instances, the Small Business Administration. But this action, because supply chain risk is such a big deal, and has been something that the department is very interested in addressing, because of the seriousness of this area, the determination to exclude you or take any of these actions is not reviewable in a bid protest. And as a result, probably the only recourse you would have if you found yourself excluded under the DFAR would be to file some kind of an action under the Administrative Procedures Act, which would probably go through one of the district courts. though the prospects for victory are not very good because you'll have to overcome the APA standard and show that the decision to exclude you was arbitrary, capricious, and abuse of discretion, etc. So it's important to understand, not only, to sum up this topic, not only that you have this obligation to understand and protect your supply chain, but that there are some significant consequences under the DFAR if you fail to do that. We could go to the next slide, please. So another category of procurement that the DFAR deals with are telecommunications services. Now, I want to, on the slide here, you'll see that there's a definition of what telecommunications means under the DFAR. There's also a definition of telecommunications services. And I'd like to take a minute and point out that there's some interplay here with Section 889 of the National Defense Authorization Act from FY 2019, and the prohibitions on procuring covered telecommunications equipment or services from Chinese affiliates like Huawei, ZTE, and others. One of the big things that has been a problem for contractors in the implementation of Section 889 is that those key terms, what is telecommunications equipment, what are telecommunications services, aren't really defined in the way that they're defined here. They're defined by reference to the companies. So they're a little bit circular in the definition. It's any, what is telecommunications equipment? Well, it's any telecommunications equipment that comes from one of these companies. And so that's caused a lot of confusion from contractors and how they should implement Section 889 and what it actually encompasses and what it does. And so I wanted to flag here that there is this definition in the DFAR of what telecommunication is, also a definition of telecommunication services. But it's important to note that there is not a definition of what is telecommunications equipment. And so these definitions only get you so far in thinking about what Section 889 means. And you also need to note that the Section 889 requirements are in the FAR, in FAR Part 39, but they are also independently in the DFAR. And if you go to DFAR 252, 204, 7018, for example, there is the same prohibition under Section 889, but it has been amended a little bit. And so under the FAR, there are some exceptions under services for things like backhaul, roaming, interconnection agreements. Those kinds of services are expressly exempted under the FAR definition. But if you go to the DFAR definition and the DFAR clause, there are no exceptions for services. And so it's important to understand that there is an ability, if you're struggling with what you have to do under Section 889, there are these definitions in DFAR Part 239 that you can go and look at that get you a little bit down the road of analysis, but you do have to keep in mind that it's not a perfect answer as to what you have to do. And you're going to have to look at each situation individually and make judgments based on what the equipment or services are and what they do. When you're dealing with DFAR and when you're dealing with a telecommunications procurement, you are bound to these definitions, and you should be using these definitions to guide you as you process through the rest of the telecommunications procurement provision. But I did want to flag that there is a little bit of interplay here with Section 889. We could go to the next slide. The basics of telecommunications procurements are that they have to be conducted on a competitive basis. That's not much of a surprise. Almost all procurements are conducted on a competitive basis. But one thing that is a little bit different for telecommunications is that they can be procured on a month-to-month basis for a period of up to 10 years. And as always, you can use other than full and open competition methods if they're justified in accordance with the FAR. One other thing that telecommunications services procurements have to do is they have to recognize the FCC's regulations and the practices and procedures there. And there have to be contract provisions that are consistent with them. As a general rule of thumb, you can use generally accepted industry practices where the FCC regs don't speak to something, but where the FCC regs speak to something, you have to follow the FCC regs in addition to all of the FAR and DFAR requirements. So it adds another layer of regulatory complexity when you're conducting a telecommunication services procurement. And then the security requirements for telecommunications are no different than they are for other systems. You should try to make sure that the systems are interoperable with other government systems. And generally, the preference is that the contractor should furnish any of the property and equipment that's necessary for these procurements rather than the government furnishing it. And once again, you know, I've made a reference to the interplay with Section 889, which we've already talked through, so I won't go back and beat that up anymore. If we could go to the next slide. Another thing that's different about telecommunication services procurements are because if you're a common carrier and you have tariffed rates, those rates have been set by regulation under the FCC's regs. There is no requirement to submit certified cost or pricing data. Now, that exception does not apply if you don't have tariff services or if you are not a common carrier under the FCC's regs, then you're not exempt from this requirement, and certified cost or pricing data could be required if you will be required if you meet the thresholds at which it's required. And I believe the current threshold for that is $2 million, though you could go to the FAR and check to make sure, and you should always check to make sure you know what the current threshold is. But at the end of the day, the requirement is that contracting officers have to obtain sufficient data to determine that the prices offered are reasonable. So regardless of whether you're going to be furnishing certified cost or pricing data, you are nonetheless going to have to furnish data so that the contracting officer can make a determination as to whether or not your price is reasonable. For telecommunication services, you can also use FAR 16702 basic agreements. So a basic agreement is not a contract itself. It is similar to a BPA. It establishes some ground rules that will apply in future contracts. And that makes sense when you remember that on the previous slide, we discussed that these services can be procured on a month-to-month basis. You don't want to have to negotiate the whole agreement every month, every time. And so what you can do is you can use a basic agreement, set some of the ground rules in place, and then as you go, you can cut smaller contracts where you nail down some of the details that aren't established by the basic agreement under FAR 16702. And another rule that's specific to telecommunication services is if you have to engage in construction in connection with providing the services, you have to submit a detailed special construction proposal, and the CO is supposed to have a ceiling on the charges before they authorize you to proceed. And there is some interplay here with the Davis-Bacon Act under FAR subpart 22.4. So remember on the prior slide, I said that the contractor is supposed to be furnishing the facilities and the equipment that are necessary. If the construction requires the contractor to, build new towers or new facilities that house the server farms and the routers for the telecommunications, and that is being done on the contractor's land that the contractor owns, the Davis-Bacon Act does not apply. But if you're doing construction that is an alteration or repair of a public building or a public work, in other words, you're building these facilities or this infrastructure on a government facility, like a military base, then you will have to comply with the Davis-Bacon Act. And for those who aren't familiar with that act, it's basically a minimum wage statute that applies for federal construction contracts, and it specifies certain wage rates that have to be, and fringe rates that have to be paid to contractors who are working on those types of contracts. And then the last thing here is that on telecommunication services is that rates and charges should be estimated and negotiated prior to starting the service, but you can use provisional rates similar to the way that you would do under a cost type contract. If we could go to the next slide, we'll get into the last area of discussion, which is on cloud computing. Cloud computing is similar to everything else under the DFAR. There's a preference for trying to use commercial items and using commercial terms and conditions. So cloud computing contracts are supposed to incorporate commercial license agreements, EULAs, and terms of services. But again, just as with other procurements, those terms have to be consistent with federal law and the agency's needs. So even in cloud computing, you might expect to see areas where the agency will want to negotiate specific terms of your EULA or your commercial license that are inconsistent with federal law. Award for cloud computing contracts requires provisional authorization from DISA, which is the Defense Information Systems Agency, and they grant authorization under the Cloud Computing Security Requirements Guide. Now that authorization can be waived by the DoD CIO, and it's not required if your cloud computing service is for a private on-premise version that's provisioned from U.S. government facilities. So generally, if you don't know a lot about cloud computing, a very broad brush overview of the way it works is private companies build facilities all around the country where they have big server farms that have computing resources in them. And if you are a subscriber to their services and you need some computing power, it might come from the one that's close to you in Maryland, if you're in DC, or it might get routed to something out of Oregon, or it can be down in Texas. The resources are pooled and they're provisioned and allocated to users as they're needed. Well, another way you could do it is you could build it on a military facility, and you could make it so that no one outside of that facility could access it. And so the resources are all kind of self-contained. If you're doing that, these authorizations aren't technically required, but that is a little bit contrary to the way that cloud computing normally works. And so you'll only see this kind of thing in very specialized procurements where you're dealing with national security requirements that require it. But generally, the contracting officer is going to be reviewing your cloud service catalog to verify that there is provisional authorization from DISA before they purchase cloud computing services from you. If we could go to the last slide. These contracts are going to include provisions about data ownership, licensing, delivery, and disposition, and some requirements that will support inspection, audit, and investigation. Remember that these are the kinds of things that are driven by federal procurement law and requirements that are imposed there. And so these are the types of things you may see the government wanting to negotiate special terms for if you don't have something already built into your EULA or your license terms. And then the last big requirement here is, remember that we talked about a broad brush overview about how cloud services work. For DFAR procurements, government data has to be stored within the US or its outlying areas. So remember that these resources can be geographically distributed all around. They could also be over in Europe or in Asia. Or, you can have server farms, down in Australia or India or wherever they are. But if you're dealing with a government procurement of DoD data, the data is supposed to be stored within the US or its outlying areas, unless it's physically located on a DoD premises, so a military base that's somewhere else. Up until recently, for example, Afghanistan might have been, a base in Afghanistan might have been a permissible place, or unless the authorizing official has authorized you to put it in a non-US location. And the authorizing official is a senior federal official who has the authority to assume responsibility for operating the information system at an acceptable level of risk. So just keep in mind that for cloud computing, there is this specific restriction that is a little bit different than a standard commercial cloud computing procurement, because normally you would be able to provision resources from wherever in the world that you had them. If you're dealing with DoD, unless you have an exception, the government data is going to have to be stored within the US or its outlying areas. And if we can go to the next slide, which will be the last slide, I'll wrap it up. So to recap, you have to read this in DFAR 239 in conjunction with FAR Part 39. There are general requirements throughout the DFAR that apply to national security systems, which are systems that govern military or intelligence functions generally. And the kinds of things that, as you can see from the regs, that are themes that run through them are the security of the information and the equipment on which that information is stored, making sure that you eliminate supply chain risk, that you have information assurance that protects the data that's on these systems, and making sure that you meet tempest standards if they're applicable. And then generally, though, these procurements are supposed to be commercial item procurements and are supposed to be under general commercial terms and conditions, but there will be some interplay and some negotiation as needed to meet federal procurement laws and make sure that those license terms are consistent with federal procurement laws and the other requirements that we've discussed here for protecting the information and systems on which they sit. So with that, that's all I have on DFAR Part 239. My contact information is here on the screen, and if you have any questions about anything that I've covered or things that you wanted to raise, you can please feel free to contact me either at the email that's on the screen, lhanback@rjo.com, or at my phone number, 760-470-5564. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, Hunter.
Thank you so much, Lucas. And as Lucas said, definitely reach out if you have any questions regarding any of the content in this presentation today. And thank you, Lucas, for a great presentation and sharing your time with us. And thank you to everyone who joined us for this webinar. The recording will be on our website and YouTube channel within the next 24 hours. And please join us next week as we cover more parts of the DFARS. Have a good week, everyone.